Xbox and Xbox Game Studios are winning. No, I'm not talking about that ridiculous console war discussion. If you have to fight over which plastic box is better at playing games, you probably have bigger things to worry about. I'm talking that Xbox in general is doing some amazing things. It's no secret that the last generation of consoles, being the Xbox One for Microsoft, was seen in a much more negative light. And we're going to talk about that in this video. We're going to talk about that and leading up to the present and where Xbox stands now. Just remember, if you liked the video, to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content like this, consider subscribing. Anyway, let's get to it. Let's go back to the beginning of the last generation. Do you guys remember this video?
This is how you share your games on PS4. Thanks.
PlayStation.
I'm sorry, it's just funny. The fact that Sony had actually funded this commercial to air on television and on YouTube is honestly hilarious. It's obviously not a huge budget commercial. It looks like it took place in the same room that they do B-listing casting couch auditions. But that's aside the point. This commercial was released as a response to the fact that Microsoft and Xbox had just revealed the Xbox One. They had also revealed their stance on how they are going to tackle game licensing for the Xbox One console. I'm not going to get too into it because I'm sure that you guys remember the always online DRM thing that Xbox was trying to go for. They were really pushing Xbox One as a media box more than just a game console. And this did not go over well. It blew up in their face. I mean, how is it actually a thing? How is it that you could buy a game that you own as a disc and not share it with your friends? The whole idea was just ridiculous. And while they did eventually reverse their stance on it, the damage was done. And there it was, the Xbox One was off to a rocky start. Now, I'm sure the topic that you thought that I was going to bring up is the exclusives, and we are definitely going to talk about that because it absolutely had a huge impact on the generation. Now, what's funny is that at the beginning of the generation for the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, neither of the consoles really had that many good launch titles or exclusives lined up for it at that time. If I remember correctly, the launch titles for the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 were Killzone Shadowfall and Rise Son of Rome, both of which weren't really received that well. Now, if you were like me, and frankly a vast majority of gamers, this news didn't really affect my purchasing decision that much. Once Xbox had backpedaled on their decision to do the always online DRM, I went out and bought one. I think the tough thing to remember here is that there's a vast, silent majority of gamers who just don't give a crap about game politics, which console has higher resolutions or frame rates, or anything like that. They just want to be able to play their games. I'd say the vast majority of casual gamers fall under the category of people that play the likes of annual sports games, Call of Duty, Battlefield, and Fortnite. Of course, as you move more towards the enthusiast style of gamer, that demographic is going to change. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because of that loud, vocal 1% that apparently speaks for all gamers. You know exactly the type of people that I'm talking about. These are the people that push the narratives that stir up the console wars. And as the generation wore on, you've heard all the arguments how the Xbox One has no exclusives. Exclusives sell consoles. Why would anyone buy an Xbox? And look, I get it. If you are the enthusiast gamer, there was not a big reason to go out and buy an Xbox over a PlayStation. The PlayStation had higher quality exclusives, had a more powerful console, and didn't shoot itself in the foot with the always online DRM at launch. Ultimately, it's down to your personal preference. There are a lot of people who don't like the PlayStation exclusives and prefer what Xbox does on their end, but this was just the general consensus. Now, Xbox did make up some ground later on in the generation with the release of the Xbox One X and Xbox Game Pass, but you have to remember that when Xbox Game Pass launched, this was not viewed in the same light as it is today. The promise behind a subscription-based service for gaming was promising, but didn't quite have the value yet. With the release of the Xbox One X, Xbox was finally able to claim the most powerful console in the world. But where were the games? Sony was about to send their PlayStation 4 out with a bang with some of their biggest hits with God of War, Spider-Man, The Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima, and so on. And Xbox and Phil Spencer had heard the cries, they heard the complaints, and they went out and acquired a bunch of studios. In the first batch of studios, they picked up studios such as Compulsion Games, Obsidian Entertainment, Ninja Theory, Playground Games, and a few more. And then obviously in more recent news, with the acquisition of Bethesda and ZeniMax and all of these subsidiaries under that umbrella now falling under the Xbox Game Studios brand, this is where a turning point in the narrative for Xbox has started to change. It's almost as if this was Xbox's big picture plan. When Xbox had announced that all first-party titles were going to come to Xbox Game Pass, people were like, well, great, but where are the studios? Where are the titles? And then that's when the acquisition started to come. Now Xbox Game Pass started to have value. While the games weren't there just yet, you could see the value proposition or a subscription-based game service. Which brings us to today. I mean, if you look at Xbox as a brand and the way it's viewed, it is vastly different than the way it was viewed during the last generation. A lot of people would argue that the success of a console, or any piece of hardware for that matter, is solely dependent with the amount of units sold. And while there is some validity to that statement, the narrative behind it is changing. With the likes of Game Pass and a subscription-based service entering the market, and now with Xbox and Microsoft taking an ecosystem approach to expanding their brand and their growth as a business. Microsoft and Xbox no longer care if you buy their console as long as you buy into their ecosystem. You can now play Xbox Game Pass on mobile devices and your web browser along with your consoles. Xbox really looked at everything and said, you know what, we don't care if you buy our hardware, we just want you in our house. We just want you in our ecosystem. Another thing to keep in mind is that for the first few years of a console's lifespan, consoles are sold at a loss. Microsoft and Sony are taking a hit on the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X as we speak. These big game companies and publishers make their money from software sales. They do not make it from hardware. While hardware is a part of the equation, the vast majority of money comes from the games that are sold. Or in Xbox's case, how many subscribers are part of Game Pass. If you want to talk about it from a business perspective, the beauty of Game Pass is that it is recurring revenue for Microsoft and the Xbox game studios. Another interesting statistic is that game sales are actually rising when the games are part of Xbox Game Pass. People are using Game Pass as sort of a demo library. People will try the game on Game Pass and then go out and buy the full version so that they can support the developer. This is almost counterintuitive because Game Pass is supposed to save you money, but gamers, as with most fans of anything really, like to support things. And this really brings me to my final point, that what Xbox is doing with Game Pass and xCloud is that they are bringing games to people who otherwise could not afford it, or it's simply not available where they live. More people getting to play games by making them as accessible as possible is amazing. And all of this is not to say that exclusives aren't important or that they shouldn't exist. I completely understand why they exist from a business perspective. But now the narrative is changing, where it used to be, just give me a high quality product and I'll pay whatever you want for it. Now it's turned into, wait, so you're saying that I can have a high quality product, I don't have to pay too much for it, and I don't have to buy a specific piece of hardware in order to be a part of it? Count me in. And that's where I'll leave you off. Xbox is doing some really cool things with their brand, and there are some exciting times ahead. But I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys think. Has your stance on Xbox as a brand changed over the past few years? Are you just waiting to see how things play out? Let's talk about it down in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, and if you want to support the channel further, hit that subscribe button. And before you get your panties in a bunch, I will do a video just like this for the PlayStation, as I said in my video about how Nintendo is winning. Be sure to follow me on Twitter for any and all updates. I'll leave a link to my social media accounts in the description down below. I'll catch you guys next time.